Here's the translation and rewrite, tailored for interpretation and light expansion. With the story's commencement, we are transported back to the late 15th century, a transformative period for Europe. The old feudal system was waning, giving rise to a new economic era fueled by burgeoning trade, the rise of banking institutions, and the influx of precious metals. At the heart of this dynamic epoch, a young man hailing from the imperial city of Augsburg was poised to become the most influential banker the continent had ever witnessed. His name was Jakob Fugger, who would later be renowned throughout Europe as Jakob Fugger the Rich. Born in 1459 into the Fugger family, Jakob entered a world already deeply shaped by commerce. His grandfather and father had diligently built the family trade, evolving from simple textile dealing into a respectable merchant enterprise. They engaged in the trade of cotton, wool, dyes, and fine fabrics, goods that traversed from Italy to Germany and throughout the Alpine trade routes. Yet, no one in Augsburg, perhaps not even the Fuggers themselves, could have foreseen that Jacob would take this modest foundation and transform into a vast financial empire capable of wielding influence over kings, popes, and the very structure of European politics. Jacob, being the youngest son, was initially expected to join the church, a common path for younger sons in many merchant families of the German free cities. Indeed, his mother initially directed him to study for a clerical vocation. However, Jacob harbored no desire for the tranquil discipline of religious orders. He was, at heart, a child of numbers, money, and ambition, a boy far more captivated by accounting ledgers and prayer books. With unwavering persistence, he eventually persuaded his family to allow him to abandon the religious path and join the family business in Venice, the vibrant epicenter of European commerce. It was in Venice that Jakob Fugger first grasped the true magnitude of wealth and financial innovation. The city served as a vital crossroads for bankers, merchants, and traders, facilitating the movement of goods between the Mediterranean and Northern Europe. Jacob immersed himself in learning Italian bookkeeping techniques, particularly the double-entry ledger system, a relatively new concept in German territories, and mastered the art of crafting complex financial contracts. He meticulously studied foreign exchange markets, credit instruments, and the intricate politics underlying merchant deals. Here, he unearthed a fundamental truth that would shape his life's trajectory. Money was not merely wealth, it was power. And those who possessed a deep understanding of the mechanisms of money held the potential to influence empires. At the age of 23, Jacob returned to Augsburg armed with his Italian training, a sharp intellect, and ambitions that far surpassed those of a simple merchant. He successfully convinced his brothers to expand the family operations into the realm of banking, a pivotal decision that would irrevocably transform their fortunes. Instead of merely trading goods, Jacob sought to finance kings, extend loans to princes, and strategically acquire influence through credit. His grand opportunity presented itself through the Vatican. During the 1480s, Rome found itself in dire need of funds, vast sums of it. The papacy was engaged in ambitious projects, including rebuilding churches, funding political campaigns, and engaging in costly regional conflicts. Jacob recognized this need as the perfect opening. He initiated the supply of loans, financial services, and even managed indulgence revenues for the Vatican. His reliability and precision made a lasting impression on the clergy. Before long, the Fugger accounts became deeply intertwined with those of some of the most powerful families in Rome. Yet, Jacob's ambitions extended far beyond this. He had set his sights on a different, even more lucrative prize, the mining world of Central Europe. Silver and copper were the lifeblood of Renaissance economies, playing a crucial role in determining currency values and national wealth. Whoever held control of the mines effectively controlled the monetary flow of empires. Jacob embarked on an aggressive investment strategy, pouring resources into Tyrolean and Hungarian mines, offering princes substantial loans in exchange for coveted mining rights. These strategic deals transformed the Fuggers into foremost producers of silver and copper across Europe. By the late 1490s, Jakob Fugger was already gaining recognition as the richest man in Christendom. However, mere wealth was not enough to satisfy his aspirations. He craved influence, the kind that could shape dynasties and alter the course of history. That opportunity arose in 1519, when the Holy Roman Empire faced the task of electing a new emperor. The candidate favored by many was Charles of Habsburg, the future Charles V. However, the election hinged significantly on the support of 7 prince-electors, each of whom sought guarantees, favors, or substantial financial rewards. This was Jakob's moment to seize control. He orchestrated the most expensive political financing operation in European history up to that point. Through his extensive banking network, Fugger distributed massive sums. Some estimates suggest the equivalent of hundreds of millions of modern dollars, to secure the votes needed to elect Charles. Every transaction was meticulously recorded and documented. When the election concluded, Charles ascended to the throne as emperor, and Jakob Fugger became the undisputed master of European finance. It was commonly said across courts and marketplaces alike, a Fugger made the emperor. However, Jakob's meteoric rise did not come without consequences. His sprawling banking empire drew criticism from early reformers who expressed concerns about the growing influence of money over both the church and politics. Even Martin Luther voiced his displeasure regarding the Fugger monopoly on mining and papal finances. Yet, Jakob remained unfazed. He firmly believed in the legitimacy of commerce and perceived himself not as a villain, but as a facilitator of stability. In his perspective, princes might wage wars and establish governments, but without credit, none of their endeavors could succeed. As the 16th century dawned, Jakob Fugger stood as one of the wealthiest individuals in European history. Some economic historians estimate that his wealth constituted approximately 2% of Europe's total GDP, an astonishing figure when viewed through the lens of modern economics. His influence extended from the Vatican to Madrid, from Vienna to the mining towns nestled in the Alps. His wealth was not derived from inherited privilege, but rather from strategic intelligence, unwavering ambition, and a fearless determination to reshape the economic landscape around him. This is where our story truly begins. At the genesis of a fortune so immense and a legacy so enduring that Jakob Fugger will become an iconic symbol of the Renaissance's financial revolution. In the subsequent part, we will delve into his ascent into the political heart of Europe, where his loans, contracts, and clandestine deals would wield influence over empires and set the stage for some of the most pivotal events of the early modern world. Turning to the next chapter of our narrative, we find Jakob Fugger positioned at the center of an intricate web of financial power. Yet, the zenith of his influence was only beginning to unfold. Having mastered the realms of Venetian trade, papal finance, and Central European mining, Jakob turned his attention toward an even more ambitious undertaking, shaping the political destiny of Europe through the strategic deployment of money. By the early 1500s, the Fugger banking house had solidified its reputation as a preferred lender of choice for kings, archdukes, and high-ranking nobles. However, these partnerships also thrust Jakob into a perilous arena, one where alliances were prone to rapid shifts and loyalty could be bought or broken depending on the magnitude of a loan. Jakob possessed a profound understanding of this dynamic. He was far more than a mere merchant. He was a shrewd strategist who viewed every political development as a potential financial opportunity. His most significant partnership during this era was forged with the ascendant Habsburg dynasty, particularly Maximilian I, King of the Romans and later Holy Roman Emperor. Maximilian was a visionary, a man of immense ambition but lacking in financial discipline. His military campaigns, court expenses, and political machinations consistently depleted his treasury. He was in constant need of funds, substantial amounts of it, and Jakob Fugger emerged as the individual he relied on most heavily. Maximilian's debts to Fugger ballooned to enormous proportions. Yet, Jakob never hesitated to extend credit. For him, lending to Maximilian was not an act of charity. It was a strategic investment in influence. Each loan secured a new privilege: mining rights, tax exemptions, commercial monopolies, and robust political protections. By financing the Habsburgs, Jakob was not only augmenting his wealth, he was strategically weaving himself into the very fabric of European power. The partnership reached a critical juncture in 1519 when Maximilian passed away, triggering the election for a new emperor. The leading contenders were Francis I of France and Charles of Habsburg. Both were resolutely determined to win, and both were acutely aware that the electors expected substantial gifts, a euphemistic term for bribes. Jakob Fugger, fully comprehending the stakes, threw his support behind the Habsburg cause. He organized loans on a scale previously unseen in Europe, channeling funds through his intricate network to secure votes for Charles. The electors reached an agreement. The votes were cast, and Charles was crowned Emperor Charles V, ruler of a vast realm encompassing territories from Spain to Austria, and from the Low Countries to the Americas. And orchestrating this ascent was the silent authority of Jakob Fugger. However, Jacob's involvement in imperial politics carried broader ramifications. By financing Charles V, he indirectly influenced major events such as Spain's colonial expansion, the wars against France, and even the shaping of Europe's monetary systems. His loans played a pivotal role in funding armies, fortifications, and royal courts. Fugger money flowed into ships traversing the Atlantic, soldiers marching across Italy, and diplomats negotiating alliances. While the emperors wielded swords and crowns, Jakob wielded credit and contracts, and in many instances his influence proved to be the more decisive force. Yet, European politics did not constitute Jacob's sole preoccupation. He was also focused on consolidating a near monopoly in the mining sector. By the early 1500s, his operations extended across Tyrol, Hungary, Bohemia, and even parts of Spain. In certain regions, the Fuggers controlled as much as half of the silver production and a substantial portion of the copper that fueled Europe's economies. Copper held particular importance. It was utilized in coin minting, weaponry, and trade with the Ottoman Empire. The Fugger mining empire was not built without facing considerable hardships. Jacob's agents toiled in perilous mountain environments, engaging in negotiations with nobles, addressing strikes, tackling smuggling issues, and navigating complex local politics. However, Jakob remained relentless. He introduced innovative management structures, modern accounting methodologies, and pioneering investment models. His operations were so remarkably efficient that historians often characterize the Fugger mining network as one of the earliest proto-industrial systems in Europe. But Jacob's burgeoning wealth also attracted detractors. Many nobles resented his influence over their finances. Some were indignant that a mere merchant could command greater wealth than dukes. Early reformers within the church criticized him for charging interest, which they deemed usury. Even Martin Luther, in his renowned writings, denounced the Fuggers' monopoly in mining and papal finances. However, Jakob regarded criticism as an inevitable consequence of progress. To him, commerce was not a sin. It was a driving force behind civilization. He once declared, "Trade must be free. Without profit, there is no world." At the same time, Jakob understood that constructing a financial empire necessitated more than just wealth. It required trust. He ensured that the Fugger name became synonymous with reliability and precision. His network relied on couriers, encrypted letters, and meticulously coordinated accounting offices throughout Europe. His ledgers gained renown for their accuracy, and courts frequently consulted Fugger records as legal evidence. Jacob's economic footprint expanded even further through his involvement in the indulgence system, an enterprise that ultimately contributed to triggering the Protestant Reformation. The Vatican, burdened by debt and eager to finance grand construction projects like St. Peter's Basilica, partnered with the Fuggers to manage the sale of indulgences in German territories. Jakob viewed this not only as a lucrative venture, but also as a means of strengthening ties with Rome. The revenues flowed through his banks, bolstering his influence and his notoriety. However, while indulgences generated profit, they also provoked anger. Many Germans felt exploited by Rome's financial pressure. Figures like Luther contended that the church's spiritual authority had been corrupted by money, and Jakob Fugger became one of the names associated with this corruption, even though he was simply a banker serving powerful clients. Despite the criticism, Jakob pressed forward undeterred. He firmly believed that economic advancement and societal progress were inextricably linked. His philosophy was straightforward. If money possessed the power to shape kingdoms, then those who understood money bore the responsibility to shape history. By the mid-1510s, Jakob Fugger had attained a level of wealth and power that was unparalleled in Europe. He was not a king, yet he commanded resources that surpassed those of many kingdoms. He was not a noble by birth, yet emperors relied on him. He was not a politician, yet he exerted influence over political outcomes. And he was not a miner, yet he controlled the flow of precious metals across the continent. His ascent marked a pivotal turning point in European civilization, the moment when financial power became as significant as military or noble power. In the next segment, we will explore how Jakob Fugger's influence extended into social reform, urban development, and the surprising legacy that will reflect his values far beyond the realms of banking and mining. Jakob Fugger's rise in the early 16th century was not solely attributable to his business acumen, but also to a political strategy that surpassed that of any merchant of his era. While we previously examined how he expanded his operations through silver, copper, and trade, this period marks his transformation from a wealthy businessman into a figure capable of influencing the destinies of nations. At the turn of the century, the Holy Roman Empire found itself in a state of profound turmoil. Emperor Maximilian I, the ruler of this vast realm, was perpetually burdened by wars, familial ambitions, and the financial strain of maintaining authority over fragmented territories. Amidst this climate of instability, Jakob Fugger emerged as the one individual the emperor could truly rely upon. Many historians characterize their relationship not as a typical financial partnership, but as something akin to a monarchy sustained by a private treasury. Fugger became the financial lifeline of Maximilian I. He provided funding for imperial ceremonies, military campaigns, and diplomatic missions, essentially underwriting the continued existence of the Habsburg dynasty. In return, he received unprecedented privileges: mining rights, trade monopolies, and imperial protection. Maximilian granted him control over the richest silver mines in Tyrol and open access to copper deposits across Central Europe. These privileges empowered Fugger to reshape the metal market on a scale previously unimaginable. Yet, Fugger's influence extended far beyond the economic sphere. His true power manifested in 1519, when Maximilian I died, and Europe faced a fierce contest for the imperial throne. The leading contenders were Francois I of France and Charles I of Spain, the young heir of the Habsburgs. The election of a Holy Roman Emperor in those days was not determined by political ideals. It was decided by the electors, and the electors could be persuaded with money. At this pivotal moment, Jakob Fugger executed one of the most audacious moves in financial history. He poured massive sums into securing votes, distributing funds to the 7 prince electors through loans, gifts, and carefully negotiated arrangements. These funds swayed the election and ultimately placed Charles I on the throne as Emperor Charles V, ruler of an empire spanning across Europe and into the New World. Numerous historians note that without Fugger's intervention, Charles would not have become emperor. This action earned Fugger the legendary moniker Kingmaker of Renaissance Europe, a merchant powerful enough to install emperors on the throne. Of course, Fugger was not driven by idealism. He possessed a clear understanding of what he stood to gain: renewed mining privileges, expanded monopolies, and unparalleled political protection. With Charles V now at the helm as emperor, Fugger's operations experienced a dramatic expansion. He managed the production and distribution of copper throughout Europe, an essential metal for weaponry, coinage, and warfare. His influence extended from German mining towns to the ports of Venice and Lisbon, solidifying his position as a central figure in Europe's military and economic engine. Back in Augsburg, Fugger channeled his wealth not only into business expansion, but also into solidifying his family's legacy. He established the Fuggerei, the oldest social housing complex in Europe, where the impoverished could reside for a nominal annual fee. The sole stipulation was that they offer prayers for Fugger family. This blend of philanthropy and legacy building underscores a man acutely aware of the significance of reputation and posterity. However, Fugger's power also ignited concerns. Many intellectuals began to question whether a merchant should wield influence that rivaled or even surpassed that of kings. Martin Luther, among others, criticized Fugger's financial practices, arguing that extending loans to princes with exorbitant interest rates bordered on moral transgression. Fugger found himself caught in the throes of the Protestant Reformation, a movement that posed a threat to both the Catholic Church and the financial system that sustained it. Yet, Fugger remained adaptable. He diversified his investments, provided capital for global trade, and expanded his network into Iberian enterprises tied to colonial mining. Copper and silver from the New World began to flow through markets connected to Fugger's sphere of influence, further augmenting his global reach. This section concludes at the apex of Jakob Fugger's power. However, The world was undergoing rapid transformations, politically, religiously, and economically, and the challenges he was about to confront would put to the test even the most formidable financier of the Renaissance. As Jakob Fugger entered the 1520s, Europe was undergoing one of the most dramatic transformations in its history. If the previous sections described his ascent from merchant to Europe's most powerful financier, this phase reveals how he confronted challenges that shook the entire continent: religious upheaval, political fragmentation, public criticism, and fierce competition. Remarkably, Fugger not only survived these storms but continued to fortify his empire. In 1517, Martin Luther published his 95 Theses, igniting the Protestant Reformation. To many people, this was a spiritual revolution, but to bankers and financiers, it was a direct threat to the foundations of their business. Luther condemned the sale of indulgences, denounced financial corruption in the church, and harshly criticized the lending systems of the era, systems in which Jakob Fugger played a central role. Fugger's name emerged repeatedly in discussions about economic exploitation. To the common people, he symbolized the excess wealth of the elite. Luther accused wealthy lenders of contributing to the moral decay of society. For many Germans, Fugger became a target of suspicion, not because of wrongdoing, but because he was simply too powerful. Unlike other business dynasties that tried to hide or shrink from the controversy, Fugger confronted the criticism openly. He firmly defended the value of credit, arguing that no kingdom could survive without loans. Without capital, he claimed, there can be neither war nor peace. In an age where empires depended on military campaigns, this logic was undeniable. Even as the Reformation spread, Fugger's influence remained intact. When Emperor Charles V needed funds to confront Protestant princes, he once again turned to Fugger. Each loan strengthened Fugger's grip on European politics and ensured that the Habsburgs remained indebted to him, literally and figuratively. Meanwhile, competition intensified. The Welser family, a powerful German banking clan, challenged Fugger's dominance. Italian banking houses, with centuries of experience, also competed fiercely. But Fugger possessed a unique philosophy: do not expand unless you can control the risk. This principle allowed him to survive economic shocks that destroyed many other banks. One of Fugger's boldest strategies during this period was expanding into global trade networks via Spain and Portugal. While many Europeans still viewed the oceans as unpredictable and dangerous, Fugger recognized them as the backbone of a future global economy. He invested in mining operations in the New World, supported transatlantic silver shipments, and indirectly financed Asian spice trade. Perhaps his greatest innovation of this era was his adoption of an early international bill of exchange system, enabling merchants to transfer money across continents without transporting precious metal. This drastically reduced risk, accelerated trade, and positioned Fugger's financial network at the center of global commerce. Between 1520 and 1523, Fugger faced an intimate and personal challenge: succession. He had no children. Age and illness weakened him. He began training his nephews, Ulrich, Raymond, and Anton, to take over the empire. Yet it became clear they lacked the boldness and global vision that defined Jacob's life. To compensate, Fugger created a sophisticated administrative and accounting system to ensure stability. Historians often cite this as the precursor to modern corporate accounting. By the early 1520s, Fugger's health declined sharply. Kidney problems, rheumatism, and fatigue limited his mobility. Yet even from his bed, he monitored metal prices, royal elections, diplomatic movements, and mining output. His mind remained as sharp as ever, even as his body failed. Fugger knew his era, an era he helped shape, was nearing its end. Europe was moving toward a new political and religious order. But before leaving the world, he dedicated himself to one final goal: securing the long-term survival of the Fugger dynasty amid the uncertainty of a changing continent.